Greetings, everyone. Hope everyone's having a wonderful week. So this is probably going to be another short one as well, too. This is focusing on this idea of a core ability that the player might have when going through this game. As the game scales from like one or two enemies to 10, 15 enemies. I had this question that was lingering since this whole inception. It really bothered me. This question was on how do you determine a great player versus a poor player, right? Like, what is the measurable skill? What core abilities are? Because okay, hear me out. If you have abilities, right, that solve things like slash solves this and shield solves that, and something might and fire blast might be a radius attack, and freeze obviously freezes users. I would consider and catalog this under decision making. So we reward the players on great decision making. Oh, they decided to heal the character because the character's HP was 5 or below. Simple, too simple. Or the mana ran out, or the energy ran out. They decided to use one of these potions. That's too simple. Or there are grouped enemies, and the player decided to select a radius base. All right, again, still becomes painfully too simple. I was aware of this, but we have things like, he strategically placed the shield in better places. All right, that gets a little bit better. The player is able to form words faster, giving them more energy to use more abilities. All right, that got a little bit better as well, to a little bit more complicated, a little bit more definitive in how we reward great play. But what was really missing for me was a core ability that you can tangibly measure efficacy. How good is the player getting? And it's very hard. It's much harder than I thought anyways. It's very hard for me anyways to try to find something that the player can get better at. And I think what we've landed on so far is a bow and arrow, right? You click and hold, player pulls back and is able to fire a greater distance based on how long he's holding the left click. That's one. And I feel like just with that mechanic, it can be very interesting. It can be very interesting, especially if you have like 2 collision points for the creatures, one for the body and one for example, like the head. They can aim for specific parts of a creature. And maybe it doesn't have to be the head. Maybe it's different parts. Maybe the wings for the bat, right? I don't know if that work. Actually, the wings is pretty accessible. Maybe an eye for a larger creature. Or maybe this purple thing for this creature here on the side. But whatever it is, aiming is a skill. Is a skill that you can either be poor at or terrible at. It's a little bit easier to measure that than it is to measure, he used the radius versus the singular place. He managed his energy well. All right, I don't know if it's going to take an immense amount of skill to master that. But aiming does take quite a bit of time to master. And you can always get this sensation of like, I got the perfect hit, or I measured distance properly. And so I think that construct, that functionality is going to be useful for us, especially because it scales into other abilities as well too. So you can have fire arrow, or even just a completely different weapon, but uses the same aiming mechanism of, what I'm talking about, the curve. So it's not a linear, it's not like a bullet where it travels in a linear way, but there's a curve. So it requires a little bit of timing, a little bit of, understanding of our trajectory and things like that. So I'm really happy with that for now. And I think that'll scale really well, and it'll feel like, okay, I wonder if I can do better this time. Wonder if I can get perfect aim this time, and other things as well too. Is there anything else I wanted to mention? The second. The second is like shielding and parrying. So if the left click is arrow, then the right click, we've come to the conclusion is the right click is some type of shield. So shield to block, maybe shave off 50%, 70% of damage. But a perfect block or parry will either negate the damage altogether, or even deflect deflect the projectile back against the enemy. So that can get really interesting as well too. So arrow, maybe mines, maybe throwing radius bomb type abilities as well too. Maybe even throwing using the same functionality. Drones, you throw them, after a few seconds it activates. Maybe you do combinations where you throw an ability and then you use your arrow to shoot it in midair if you want the radius to be to activate there, and all sorts of things as well too. So I'm really happy with this. I think it'll scale well in a cheap way, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like cheap in terms of it's not going to be excessively hard to layer on top of that base functionality other status or other abilities on top of that as well too. So that's it. That's all I got for now. All right. Cheers.